President Cyril Ramaphosa last night said millions of South Africans remain poor, they remain unemployed, and they live in a highly unequal society. Ramaphosa said the government will continue to pursue programs that encourage broad-based black economic empowerment, employment equity, and support medium, small enterprises, as well as employment equity. He said the government of national unity will advance three strategic priority areas. These are to drive inclusive growth and job creation, to reduce poverty, and to build a capable and ethical state. While some parties in the GNU said that the president managed to concisely summarize that of what was discussed as the roadmap during the recent cabinet lekgotla, many commentators have pointed out that none of what the president said is new. Joining us virtually, we've got former Statistician General to South Africa, Dr. Pali Lehohla. Dr. Lehohla, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks, and happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you, and thanks for the State of the Nation address yesterday.
Indeed, and
on the day of Nelson Mandela's birth.
I know, and what a nice coincidence that it happened to fall on that day. My question to you is it a happy Friday? I mean, yesterday what I felt was, you know, I sat listening to promises upon promises, and these are the same promises I've heard years and years in a row. How did you feel? I mean, what did you feel about what the president was saying last night?
Well, I was expecting to hear disrupt, a word disrupt, but I heard a lot of continue. And the 11 continues have two very difficult continues. The first one is broad-based economic empowerment and workers' rights, which the major partner, which is the DA, is diametrically opposed to in their policy position. So these are two which are very difficult, which will be very difficult to implement in the 11 continue. I've heard nothing about disrupt. I had said build a capable state, reduce poverty, and I've had encourage. And those words are not disruptive at all, because what we need is disrupt what has happened in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And the continue is not really encouraging in terms of what has to be disrupted if we have to see change. So the speech itself continued to talk on the periphery. The third continue is macroeconomic policies that we have had over the last 15 years or over the period of 30 years, which macroeconomic policies have not actually delivered what we have. They have delivered poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So I expected to hear disrupt in the speech, which I didn't hear.
Yeah.
Now I need to share my screen to show what the difficulties are. And those difficulties require disruption, not continuity. If you could allow me to be the host.
Yeah, please. That would be wonderful to see what you believe is what it is that we need to do. So we'll wait for you to start sharing those slides.
What we need to understand is this: that the situation that we are in as South Africa is irreversible. If you look at that graph, it shows the proportion of whites that actually have progressed. And I want to anchor my intervention here on generational value creation, which is a mantra that Morana Moslomi in the Free State talked about, which is generational value creation. That graph shows the generational value creation amongst whites, which is this top graph here. It shows that whites have been creating generational value. It shows that Indians have been creating generational value. You can see the upward movement of that graph. And this shows the coloreds and blacks, and these are 90% of the population. They have failed to create any generational value in the last so many years. Now, if you don't hear disrupt, which was in 1933 when we had to solve the problems of white poverty, this is what disrupt actually ended up with. If you can't disrupt, as the Indians did in 1953 when Verwoerd asked the question, what's the use of teaching Bantu children mathematics when they cannot use it in practice, they decided to go on an education path that was different. We can't hear disrupt here. And this graph is based on the most recent census of a decline in generational value amongst blacks and colors. And they're 90% of the population. And because they're 90% of the population, they drag everybody down this way. This is where we are as destroying generational value. Now, here is a graph that is very clear, and I want to talk to it in full. And here we are seeing what proportion of the skilled in employment over a period of time from 1994. And you look at, let's focus on these blacks here. Let's focus on them in 2017. Let's focus on them in 2020. Here, this light color here shows how generational value was created amongst whites, or continued to be created amongst whites, and created amongst Indians. In this first panel, 2016, second panel, 2017, third panel, 2020, I've done this for 2024 as well. And you will see the same pattern amongst these two population groups. Amongst colors, just a glimmer of hope has been created over this period. They are a third in terms of generational value. Amongst blacks, they are stuck. So given these kinds of circumstances, the speech cannot change the trajectory.
And that's, I mean,
the word continue means we will continue destroying the generational value of colors and blacks.
I think so, by putting that out to us, it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful that you've shown us that and the look of it, because that's the reality of what we're going through and what the country looks like. So we've got this government of national unity.
So amongst whites and Indians who are 8 or 10% of the population, you see generational value which is 3 times higher than that of blacks. And here you see for the age group 25 to 34 a regression from where it was in 1994 from 17% to 14%. So if your 25 to 34 are regressing, there is no future. There is no tinsel. And the speech doesn't talk to this.
So let's perhaps maybe come out of this for a second and talk a little bit more about, there's a lot of plans. That's what we heard, plans in the pipeline. Funding of land reform, transfer of state land, support the growth of rural enterprises, invest in public infrastructure, saying that cabinet members will meet in a strategic session for a medium-term development plan. That's what he really did emphasize, for this detailed plan to implement these things. So did anything, do these things, I mean, we've heard them before, and we need to keep on saying that, these goals and what they've highlighted, will this fix what you've shown us?
No, not at all. Until we understand that the fiscus, which is the tax, cannot change the trajectory, and understand that what can change the trajectory is pensions, and the role of the Treasury and the Reserve Bank in ensuring that the 26 trillion rands we tap into for changing the trajectory, if we don't tap into those, let us forget about it. It's not going to happen. And there was nothing spoken about the role of the Treasury and the Reserve Bank in relation to the 26 trillion that South Africans have. The developed world goes into the pensions. They borrow from their pensions to develop themselves. Now, we've got 26 trillion rands pensions. We talked about the SOEs trying to create a wealth fund. We already have pensions, which is 26 trillion. And we want to depend on 2 trillion tax money, which also is stolen and abused. So we shouldn't say it's small, but we should also add that it is being abused. For as long as we don't tap into that to address our plight, which the apartheid government did in order to get this generational value amongst whites, we are nibbling on the margin. And until we understand, and now we want to go into those pensions through a two-pot system where we can draw from the pensions. Instead of using that aggregated amount for our development, we allow individuals to go and tap into it and borrow from it, or rather take it even before it hatches. These policies are absolutely anti-development, completely. So we are trying to solve the issue of poverty by eating into current pensions, into current future of the children. Many people already are suffering. If they eat that pension, they'll have nothing to grow into when they retire. It will be so small and divided by amongst children who are in this plight amongst the black population. Just remember when the Venda people trooped their pensions in 1994, many of them have retired into poverty.
Yeah.
We haven't learned a lesson from there. Instead, we want a two-pot system. Instead of looking at the 26 trillion as a collective amount that we can use, that's our investable capital. And we don't need to go and borrow from anybody. We don't need to take that money and give it to the private sector in order to go and borrow from it.
Yeah.
We have direct access as government to get into that. That is what will start changing the trajectory of this country.
Yeah, yeah.
The other things are just marbles when Rome is burning.
Yeah.
And the evidence is here.
Indeed. I mean, and the borrowing costs more and more and more. And we just saw Transnet securing a loan of 18.5 billion rand as well. I mean, these are things that have to be paid back. That's the African Development Bank. But I don't want to talk on that. I want to just, because I know we've got no time left, basically just to kind of wrap this up in 2 minutes. You know, the biggest plague here in South Africa, of course, is youth unemployment. It's unemployment. It's a lack of growth in this economy. And when I heard the president, I had to giggle last night when I heard him once again emphasizing we're going to create more jobs for South Africa, and we're going to focus on processing our minerals so that we can export the finished products rather than the raw commodities. If I hear that line one more time, I don't know what I'm going to do, because it is something we've heard from the beginning of time, and we're still listening to the same narrative where we want to do this to create jobs, and yet it's never been done. Growing an economy, job creation, did you feel confident this was going to happen?
Not at all. Although I was encouraged by the intervention of the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. But he has a DA minister. I think Honorable Ndlozi cracked into the issues. So was Letlape, who said, for as long as we don't use public services as the cabinet, as the MPs, then let's forget about improvement of education or health. And I didn't hear that the people that we have voted in power are going to use those public services. That they are not going to use public security, which means improving and creating conditions for the police to do their work. As long as we use private security, private health, and private education as the elite, then the poor are on their own. And the evidence shows that they have been on their own. And the situation is getting dire because this generational value that Morana Mukomi talks about is on the decline through time. And it's not changing.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have to leave it there. I know we need to get you in and we need to speak to you more about this, but I know no doubt there will be a lot more comments. That was the former Statistician General of South Africa, Dr. Pali Lehohla, dissecting some of the issues that came out of the opening of Parliament address delivered by President Ramaphosa last night. Of course, the President touched on a wide range of issues without really giving timelines, and some have commented that none of what the President said is new, and that is one of the downfalls, unfortunately, that some are.